Welcome to the OU Sports Pod. That was one hell of a weekend. I mean, from Fletcher's Corny Dogs to Lincoln Riley and USC almost losing to Lana Del Rey. I'm not sure we're all quite recovered. That was a crazy weekend.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to all that, but first let's start with some unfortunate injury news. OU will be without Andrell Anthony, who we all thought had cemented himself as the number one wide receiver on this team until Jalil Farouk's recent play. But he will be having season-ending surgery. He injured I think it was his left knee. It was one of his knees during OU's big 34-30 win over Texas on Saturday. But here's what head coach Brent Venables had to say about the situation Monday after practice.
Yeah, it's tough. Now you hate it for him. We have other guys, and hate it for Andrell, how hard he's worked. We got to 6-0. He had a big part, and helping us get there. But all of his best football still in front of him, and he'll have a great career on the back end, of this surgery. Doesn't have much swelling, and so that usually means it's a little quicker recovery for him. So hate that for him, but this gives some other guys some opportunity.
This is pretty significant. I mean, Andrell has been one of those players OU has turned to make plays in critical situations. He leads the team in receiving, but this is tough.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, but with everybody with the depth that this room has shown, I don't think it's a huge problem. I mean, you have Jaquez Petaway, who showed out in week one, and they barely used him except on a trick play reverse that ended up being a penalty. So you can use guys like that. You can use Jaden Gibson more, who I know he had kind of a drop or a deep ball that a lot of OU fans were expecting that to be a big play against Texas. But I mean, I think with the depth they have, obviously it's a huge loss, but Jaleel Farouk has really been stepping up over the past couple of weeks. I think he can fill that wide receiver one role, really no problem. And yeah, I mean, you depth is not a problem on this team. I mean, we've seen Nick Anderson step up. That's a guy who expect him probably to get more reps. So guys like that can really fill in.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of your Nick Anderson point, I think this is a really big opportunity for him to thrive and sort of make a bigger name for himself already than he has this season. I think he has 6 touchdowns.
I don't know if you can make a bigger name than scoring the game-winning touchdown in the Red River Ride.
Yeah, but I'm talking about just in general of OU's wide receiver room. I mean, it's either him or Jaleel that steps up in my mind, and I think Nick Anderson, with the size and the speed that he showcased this season, has a really big opportunity. Another guy that you didn't mention, Brennan Thompson. I mean, he showed the burners against Iowa State, and he showed what he's capable of. And OU lost likely its biggest deep threat of the season now, so they're probably going to be looking for somebody to fill that void. And I think that void is probably found within Jaleel or Nick Anderson or maybe even Brennan Thompson. So yeah, I mean, this is what OU wanted to do with competitive depth, and I mean, it's showcasing itself now, even with a big time injury.
Yeah, I've got to think Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson are going to see bigger roles. They've shown massive potential already this season. I also think, to Jason's point, Texas transfer Brennan Thompson, who we expected to see a little bit during Red River, but didn't. But also true freshman Jaquez Petaway, who I've raved about. I think they all could see some more action. But anything else to add on Andrell's injury?
Really sucks for him. Obviously having a really great season. Was on pace for 1,200, maybe more yards.
You talk about, he's a guy who was just had such a tough time at Michigan. I mean, he had 80 yards last season, and he played almost every game. I know there were some drops that he had. There were just some basically them not using him the way that OU was using him. But I mean, he was finding his groove in OU. So obviously you hate to see that. And the connection between him and Dylan was stronger than ever. I think that was probably the most surprising part because it didn't take any time at all. Like week one, you could tell this is probably going to be their guy moving forward.
Yep.
All right, boys, let's talk Red River. OU didn't just knock off Texas. They came out of the gate swinging. I mean, intercepting Quinn Ewers on Texas' first possession. Billy Bowman laid an absolute haymaker to force a fumble. But the story of the game was Dylan Gabriel and his game-winning touchdown pass to Nick Anderson in the back of the end zone. That drive was amazing. OU went 75 yards in 5 plays. Drake Stoops caught a couple of big passes. Jason, you talked to Dylan's mom after the game. What was going on with her down there?
So it was actually a really interesting story. Because once I texted her, she was like, "Yeah, I'm in the car. I'll call you back in a second." So I waited for her call, and that's what she called. And I think the first thing I asked her, I was like, "Where were you? Like in the stands?" And she was like, "Honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I went up to the concession stands for the final 2 minutes of the game." I was like, "You did what?" And she was like, "I couldn't watch it. I couldn't stomach it." Um, so it really like just ended up being the super cool anecdote that I let off with in my story. And as like she was listening to the staccato of the crowd, she made her like rushed her way down with tears in her eyes um, as things sort of developed. So yeah, it was really cool just to kind of talk to her for 10 to 12 minutes after the game about everything. It was super cool.
The biggest play of the game to me, guys, was the big goal line stand. I mean, I think that showed the kind of football Brent Venables wants to get Oklahoma back to being. OU used to be known for its tough, hard-nosed defenses, especially when Venables was last in Norman with Bob Stoops. I mean, OU's always been good, and high-flying offenses are nice, but I think OU fans would agree with me that this program wanted to get back to that brand of football. They definitely showcased that on a national stage on Saturday. I mean, did you guys see the TV ratings that came out today?
Yeah, wasn't it
I
like
think it was
biggest game day in like a pre-November game or something like
it was
that?
biggest Red River audience since 2009. It was like 7.87 million viewers or
Wow.
something crazy like that. But anyway, Texas lined up with their big 6'4", 300-pound lineman and couldn't score on 4 plays from the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a stand from the defense. I mean, you talk about really that last play, especially when Dason and Billy, came together to make that stop. I think it was electrifying in the moment because here's a defense that, back in 2018, they're giving up 54 points, showing that scoring 48 against Georgia in the Rose Bowl isn't enough. And here they are making a huge goal line stand, making statements week in and week out, really. Aside from a quarter and a half of football, that first quarter and a half of football after the interception, obviously, against Iowa State, this defense has been incredible, a lot better than anybody has expected, really. And I think it kind of starts with the linebackers. I mean, Danny Stutzman has just been a rock for this team. Jaron Canick's really coming on, but also, the secondary, I felt like they bent, but they didn't break Sunday. They let up a lot of medium-sized receptions, but when it got down to the red zone, they were really locked down. And how about the defensive line? 5 sacks on the day, just a huge performance there, and it came from multiple guys. Rondell Bothroyd got in there, Dejon Terry, big day for transfers, another thing we might discuss on the pod, but just a huge day for the defense overall.
I kind of want to touch on all of what you said there, Lewis. I think it's pretty telling too that the same day OU's defense impresses, we're watching Lincoln Riley and USC continue to struggle in that area, which we'll get to. But
Arizona, who sucks?
Yeah. But one more thing from me on Red River, more so than both quarterbacks' play. What surprised me the most was how OU, like you said, Lewis, kept up with Texas on the line of scrimmage. I mean, we've talked all season on this pod how we haven't seen OU's defensive line create any pressure, but they played their asses off against Texas, man. Same with the offensive line. We've talked about that unit struggling as well, and they played pretty well considering all the talent on the other side. So that's really what stood out to me.
Definitely. I thought they were going to get bullied. I'm going to be honest. I mean, Texas is huge in the trenches. I was not expecting, not only did OU hold their own, they really won the battle there. Texas got, I think, like 1 sack for like a loss of one on Dylan Gabriel. So huge performance from the offensive line. Walter Rouse, who has kind of had some up and downs throughout the season. He was really huge, especially that last play. You saw him blocking 2 guys, block the safety or the cornerback coming off a blitz there. Caden Green stepped in, had a huge game once McCabe Matoyer went down. Just was not expecting them to hold their own in the trenches because they haven't been all that strong the first couple weeks. But huge performance, offense and defensive line.
Yeah, you guys really touched on everything. I think just one other thing I wanted to quickly touch on was Dason was everywhere in that goal line stand. I don't think there wasn't a play that he didn't make and those 4 downs. So that's a really good sign, especially for Colton's mentioned that like OU's looked like they've missed Justin Harrington at points this season. I mean, Dason's really coming into his own. I think it took him a little bit to kind of figure it out, but when he does figure it out, he looks like that All-American guy that, OU picked up from Indiana last season. So, yeah.
And let's give some props to Brent Venables and the work that they've done in the transfer portal. I mean, you talk about Dason, DeJohn Terry had a big day, Rondell Bothroyd, like I said. Some other guys. Andrell Anthony has been their number one receiver, obviously out for the season now, but he's been huge. So just huge props there. Walter Rouse on the offensive line. I think maybe one of the stories of the game from Saturday is just the transfers showing out.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, I echo everything you guys just said. But Jason, Lewis, what does this win mean on a national scale? And what is OU's ceiling this season?
Well, I think it's huge because it shows like, okay, first 5 weeks you had some questions. Is this just them beating up on a bunch of opponents who aren't good? I mean, the best team they played was at Cincinnati, who Cincinnati's showing that they're not a very good team. So this just shows that watch out for Oklahoma. This is not the same 6-7 team. This isn't even close to the same 6-7 team. They're unrecognizable this year from what they were last year. And watch out for them to be a big college football playoff threat going forward. Not only to make it, but maybe do some damage against the top teams. I mean, Texas is not a bad team at all. OU held their own. OU went in and they beat them. And they beat them coming back and, showed some resiliency there at the end. So huge win for Oklahoma. And I think the nation is just kind of put on alert that Oklahoma's back.
Yeah. And you kind of hit it right on the head. I mean, this win put everybody on notice. I was talking about it with Colton the other day, or I guess we did it in our little post-game video. I really think the sky's the limit for this team. And I don't even think they're playing their best ball yet. I mean, they still had some leaks on defense. Offense, went stone cold until the final drive there in the fourth. There's still a lot of improvements that could be made. And they faced Texas, who was arguably one of the most talented teams in college football from a depth perspective. I honestly think probably a college football playoff berth is what their ceiling is. Maybe they do what TCU did last year and win one game and end up in the national championship game. I wouldn't put it past them, but schedule, I mean, it's in their favor. Really, the only teams that if I were OU to worry about would be BYU, Kansas, and then eventually Texas in the Big 12 championship game if it does come down that way. But yeah, the team's much improved. I think they put the nation on notice, and that looks that way with their number 5 ranking in the AP poll.
Are we sponsored by Chick-fil-A there, Jason?
Sorry, I was losing my voice there for a second.
I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. I agree with half of what you said. I think their ceiling is a Big 12 championship win and a college football playoff berth. And that's if they can escape what Brent Venables called last night the toughest part of their schedule, which is ahead. I don't think they're in that Georgia or even Michigan tier yet, but like Brent said, I mean, this was one of those steps in the right direction for this program. Jason, you were over there talking to Brent last night more than we were. What did he say about number one, what this win can do for recruiting, but also what his staff plans to hit on the trail this week?
He really just went into, I mean, the ride after was super big, but obviously a win like this over your chief rival does pretty big things for recruiting, and he was pretty honest about that, pretty forthright. He was, mentioned that this was pretty big. I forgot who asked that question. Other thing that he mentioned, I mean, the bye week's pretty big for recruiting, and coming off a pretty significant win. Maybe the most significant win OU's had in the past 5 years. Excuse me. He said that they're going to be on the road. I know that they're building like 200 beds today for foster care homes or something like that. But Brent basically said that they're going to be on the road a lot this week for recruits. So, yeah, pretty big stuff for them.
And then Lewis, you talked to Dason McCullough and Walter Rouse, I think. What did they both have to say about playing in their first Red Rivers?
Yeah, well, the message was it's just insane. Walking out of that tunnel, half the stadium is saying that you're the greatest thing to ever touch the earth. Half the stadium is saying that you suck and everything you've done is horrible. There's just no environment like it. I mean, even from the press box, it was amazing. But basically, that's kind of the message that I got. He said he was confused because people told him that the stadium was inside the fair, and so he got all confused about that. But I think what I really took was Caden Green on that last play where Walter blocked. You see, Caden Green doesn't pick anybody up. He missed his assignment. Apparently, Bill Bedenbaugh got on him about that, and he's been tough on himself about it. When he was asked about the block, he said, yeah, I got to do better. That shouldn't happen. That's a highlight play for Walter, great play for him, but it shouldn't happen. But overall, I mean, they said the basic stuff about the atmosphere. It's second to none.
Yeah, that was a hell of a play by Walter, and one that'll be shown for quite a while. And I'm sure, some NFL prospect or NFL scouts at the game definitely, noticed that one, guys. But SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey dropped by the game on Saturday. He had a weekend, by the way. I mean, flew from Austin to Dallas from a friend's wedding to catch the first half, and then met with OU and Texas presidents and commissioners, and then flew to College Station for Texas A&M versus Alabama. But I visited with him a little earlier on in the week, and we talked all things OU Texas, Cotton Bowl, TV times. Here's a quote he gave me about that for y'all on YouTube. We will have it on YouTube, but he said, quote, "We know that the noon Eastern time kickoff window has actually become a really important television viewership window. We've had great success at 3:30 Eastern time as well. What is our CBS contract will then go to ABC, so we know there's some level of tradition being early, but we will work with our TV partners to see what may be possible next year." He later met with all of us reporters Saturday. Jason, if anything at all, what did you take away from Sankey's scrum in the press box and just from his unique presence at a game outside of his conference?
I mean, really just said he wanted to soak in the environment. He had never been to an OU Texas from what I had picked up prior to this game. So he really just came for the environment to see what it was like. I'm pretty sure he met with Chris Del Conte and a Castiglione for a bit. There was pictures of them circulating, like hugging and all that stuff. Said it's just sort of a kind of a, I'm trying to find the right word to describe it. Just a way to sort of get ready for OU's and Texas's entrance into the conference. Brett Yormark wasn't there. He said a few things about it. Greg Sankey obviously pointed that those two have a very respectful relationship, as respectful as it can get if you're two of the top commissioners in the nation. Yeah, nothing really other than other people asking him random questions about Missouri and Texas A&M and how that model can be followed with OU and Texas. But yeah, nothing too pressing.
Gotcha. Well, we rolled back into Norman Saturday night at what time? 1:30. Well, anyway, it was just in time to catch all three overtimes of USC Arizona. Guys, this has become a weekly tradition. See who's going to take USC to the wire each week. I mean, at this point, I don't even know.
Well, Lincoln Riley plays down to his competition a lot. I mean, you saw it at Oklahoma when he was here. OU didn't really have trouble winning against the big teams in the Big 12. They beat Texas. They've dominated Texas over the past 10 years, really, or ever since 2000. I think they're 17-8 against them. So that wasn't the issue. It was the games like Iowa State, Kansas State. Those would always trip them up, and they shouldn't have. Oklahoma is better than those programs. They were better than them on those years. It's just Lincoln Riley plays down to his competition because The offense has an off day, just like Caleb Williams in the first half. He didn't look great. The offense wasn't firing, and the defense just can't help them out. They just can't get stops. Alex Grinch cannot get a hold of that defense and make them play to the caliber that they're capable of with the talent that they have.
Yeah, pretty embarrassing defensive performance by the Trojans, who, by the way, go to South Bend this Saturday. So watch out for that. Caleb Williams is still amazing, which explains why they keep winning, I guess. But there's nothing else on Lincoln Riley and USC. Real quick, let's cover some of the other injury news that Brent Venables talked about last night. Offensive lineman McCade Matower and Troy Everett, as well as defensive back Gentry Williams. Brent talked about them after practice. McCade was carted off, obviously, on Saturday. Looked like he got one of his legs rolled up, but Brent said he's expected to be back sooner rather than later. And then on Troy Everett and Gentry Williams, Venables said that they would be available moving forward. So good news there. Obviously, you hate losing Andrell, but good news for OU that they didn't lose more than that. But guys, we're going to do a brief midseason position group breakdown. Lewis, let's start with you. What's one position group that has surprised you through 6 games?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say there have been a couple. I think how dominant the linebackers have been has really surprised me. You knew that they were kind of going to be good and probably the best part of that defense, but you didn't know that they were going to be this stellar. You didn't know that Danny Stutzman was going to be in the conversation for one of the best linebackers in the country. Jaron Canick's really come along. Dason, even though they lost Justin Harrington at that cheetah spot, Dason has filled in. You saw some Peyton Bowen there early. So I think that's the position that really stands out. And like I've said it so many times on this podcast, the depth that the receivers have, that it was expected that they take a step back from last year because you lose Marvin Mims. They've taken a step up. Emmett Jones has done an incredible job with this unit, getting them prepared, getting so many different guys involved in the offense. You never know who it's going to be on every given week. He's got his number one guy now down in Andrell Anthony. So we'll see how he recovers from that. But based on what he's done, there's no question in my mind that these receivers are going to be ready. They're going to keep playing through. And then the last one I would say, I don't mean to take all your guys' answers, but I kind of am. Dillon Gabriel. How about it? I mean, he's in the Heisman conversation after people were expecting to be chanting Jackson Arnold at this time before the season. So I think just what he's done has been incredible. Seems like he's playing more aggressive. He's much more willing to run, more physical. Even his deep ball, which has been a huge, huge weakness of his, or a huge point of criticism from the outside. He's improved on that. We saw that kind of against Texas. So I would say those are kind of the biggest ones for me.
Yeah, real quick, got a message from Zoom here. I'm not going to upgrade to Zoom Pro, so we got 9 minutes and 40 seconds left. But Jason, how about you?
Honestly, for me, this might be sort of a hot take, but I think the secondary has been one of the best position groups for OU this year. I mean, the way Key Lawrence is playing, the way Gentry Williams is playing. I mean, Woody's the consistent person of that group, and even Peyton Bowen. Like, if you're OU, having Peyton Bowen and Gentry Williams being this young and being this productive this early in their careers, it bodes well. I think Gentry has 3 picks now on the season. Fumble recovery. He's been everywhere at all times. Seemed like he got injured during the game last Saturday, but he's really stout. Peyton Bowen, I mean, he's, Brent has nothing but good things to say about him. Another position group that has been surprising in a negative way is the running back rotation. No continuity there, really weird rotations. Tawee Walker, to me, has been the best guy in that room, but yet they're hesitant to go to him consistently. Seems like they want Marcus Major or somebody else to be the guy, but I think it's Tawee. So that room's been weird, but yeah, secondary would be my room that has been sort of that shined the most in a way. I don't know.
All right, guys, good stuff. Let's do some quick predictions for the rest of the season. I know walking out of the fair on Saturday night, we kind of were just talking back and forth about like what's next now. I mean, OU obviously has a bye and then have UCF come to town and then go on the road to Lawrence. But a couple of the teams I'm looking at that could be tough games. I mean, West Virginia is really good. I mean, they're not bad. OSU, I mean, like looking forward, I know Lewis is giving me a look. I'm talking looking forward to like potential Big 12 title game. OSU beat Kansas State. You got to go to Stillwater. It's the last bedlam. Who knows what happens there? You go
Well,
to
cool, Matt.
BYU.
I see that, but like honestly, I think you're trying to hype up a conference that's just not good. I mean, you look at this schedule, like yeah, it's tough to go to Provo.
Well, let me
It's
let
gonna be a
me
little tough to go to Lawrence, but like at the end of the day, the Big 12 just isn't that competitive. I mean, I see it's tough not to see Oklahoma going undefeated, right?
well, I didn't finish, but
All right, go ahead.
I'm just going through their schedule, man. I mean, West Virginia's a good team, are they not?
I mean, they're okay.
Yeah, I would say they're good. You still have to go to Stillwater. You still have to go to Provo in November. It's going to be really cold there. I mean, it's 6 more games, and I was talking to Danny Stutzman last night about this. Like, you've only literally seen half of OU's schedule. Like, you've seen a small sample size. You have no idea what's going to happen the rest of the season. And let's say they do go undefeated the rest of the regular season, like they're probably still gonna have to meet Texas again in the Big 12 title game. They lose that. I mean, with Alabama playing the way that they're playing, Georgia, obviously, Michigan, the Big Ten team. I'm sorry, but OU's gonna get left out. So like even if they run the table like throughout their entire schedule, you still have that big time Big 12 championship game there. And we'll see if Texas holds. I mean, Texas could very well lose. Like it's only halfway through the season for them as well. I mean, they could 100% slip up and lose to somebody. I didn't even mention Kansas. I mean, OU goes to Lawrence. That's a good football team as well. I think OU like runs the table, goes undefeated, makes a Big 12 title game. I think they make the playoff. I'm just saying I don't think we can after 6 games with a team that I don't know. I mean, it was a great win against Texas. Do I think they're more talented and as deep as Texas? No. Do I think they beat Texas in a rematch in Arlington? No. But I just think that we would be remiss to not bring up Brent Venables literally said last night, and I don't think it's coach speak. I think if you look at the opponents top to bottom, I think the opponents they're getting ready to face in the second half of this season are better than Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa, Cincinnati, and Iowa State probably. The only team in there is Texas that's worth anything. We said all season long they didn't have any tests in Texas, so they passed their first test. Their second test is like you said earlier about Lincoln Riley not playing down to their opponents. So I think the only thing I was getting at was they only played 6 games. They have better teams coming up. And OU's obviously top 2 or the best team in the Big 12, but the best teams don't always win games.
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's going to be at this point we know OU is better than almost everybody in the Big 12. The only one you can make an argument for is Texas, maybe Kansas if you really want to throw in an argument for them. But I mean, OU's better than these teams. It's going to be whether they play down to their opponent, whether they lose in the Big 12 championships, or whether they have a special teams loss, honestly, because I could see that. And honestly, they almost had one Saturday. So those are kind of going to be the 3 reasons. But looking ahead at their schedule, I mean, it's tough to think that they don't lose a game just because like going undefeated is incredible. You don't see that
And that's
very
what I
often.
was saying. That's what I was saying. Like
But
I
but
don't
I think the only way they do is if they would have to play down to their opponent pretty badly too. Because I don't see many fierce teams. I don't think too highly of BYU. They're an okay team. You know, Kansas is a solid team, but I don't think they're going to compete with Oklahoma if Oklahoma is playing at their best. And the way Brent Venables is talking, the way he's coaching, the way he's had them prepared these first 6 weeks, I think Oklahoma's going to be playing at their best. I don't know that they have any lapses like we kind of saw in the Lincoln Riley era.
one
Here's
last
a
thing on that. I think it's obvious to say that OU is the better team, but we've seen in college football it's hard to win on the road. It doesn't really matter how much talent how much more talented you are. BYU is pretty good. They went to Arkansas and won. That's an SEC environment in a non-con. and they came out with a close win. They know how to win ball games. I mean, Keaton Slovis has played a lot of football, so I think we can't just push these teams aside, especially when there's 6 games left. I'm not saying OU loses. I'm just saying like it's hard to win 6 games in a row in football. They just did it. Can they do it again? And then West Virginia, they're undefeated in Big 12 play. I don't think that they're a bad team. I mean, yeah, they lost to Penn State, but it's Penn State. I mean, you got Neil Brown, who came in probably on the hottest seat in college football, and he has, done enough to keep his job, in my opinion. So I know we're running out of time, but Jason, what do you predict for the rest of OU's schedule? I know you're probably going to say they're going to win the national title or something.
No, I think that they probably lose one game, either if that's Texas in the national champion or not national Big 12 championship or the sorry for the background noise. I think that they win all the rest of the games except for one. And I think they win the Big 12 title. I think they lose one random game.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I will say this last thing before we leave. I think it's more likely they make the playoff if they lose a game in the regular season and then beat Texas or whoever in the Big 12 title. I don't think they get in if they go undefeated and lose in the conference title, just because based on what else is going on around the country. But I think we're losing Jason. Lewis, any other thoughts before we log off?
No, I think you guys pretty much nail it. OU has it. They've got a clear path to the college football playoff, I think. And even if they lose that Texas game, there's still a chance. That presumptively a Texas game in the Big 12 championship, still a chance.
Yep. OU controls its own destiny. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see if USC has a loss or not before then. But we'll dive into OU UCF next week. But see you then.